I got a message from Olivier on today's meeting post. He says he won't be able to make it again today. He's busy teaching this afternoon.
Okay.
He also said, FYI, my students are delivering their projects results tomorrow, and that means I'll have some feedback for Antidote/Enery Labs in the close future. They didn't produce much due to all the technicalities and setting up the environment, etc., but still that may result in a few commits sooner or later. I'll try to keep you posted.
Oh, nice. Okay. And perhaps just for those who follow along via recordings, why don't we talk about the updates on the Red Hat front?
Yes. I will. Let me see. What's the best way to talk about this? I need to share my screen anyway, so I'll just start doing that. All right. Can you see this?
Yep.
So it's done. Basically, for those that are watching, basically the thing we've been working on with Red Hat for a while is getting some Ansible content in the curriculum. The previous attempt was a little more complicated because it was requiring that we sort of have an image with sort of Ansible Tower baked in, as well as having self-medicate working on their laptop. And we just decided to take a different tack in the last really week. To be honest, it seems like my mind is still telling me that it should be longer than that, but it really hasn't. It like literally from Monday to Monday. That's when this happened. So, as a result, we just what I did was we haven't launched on enerylabs.io yet, so I just made that our test bed. I made that our version of self-medicate, our way to preview content that we're working on, which obviously we can't do that after the relaunch, but since we haven't launched yet, I decided just to move the needle on this lesson. It was worth it. So yeah, as a result, we were able to get an Ansible lesson done. It's nice. It's actually really nice. If you look at, let me see if I can load it up somewhat quickly. If I do Ansible for network automation, yep, there we go. While that's loading, basically it's 4 stages. So if you look at the lesson definition, you can see it's 4 stages. They focus on some basic stuff within Ansible. The first step is to enable netconf on the Juniper device, so you can actually reach out to it. That's by the way, this content wasn't necessarily created from scratch. It was actually copied from the existing Ansible workshops curriculum. So it's very similar to what they've been using in their actual formal training, which is also very cool. So the first step they usually do is they make sure that the network devices that they're about to work with are prepped, and that's why that's the first step. But then they go into some detail on some specifics on what you might want to know about Ansible, sort of facts and basics of playbooks. And then we end with making network configuration changes on both Junos and Cumulus. So we have the CVX image. We've had the CVX image in place for a while, just hasn't been in a lesson. The existing Ansible content, as I mentioned in their workshop, is already multi-vendor with Juniper and Cisco. But unfortunately, Cisco hasn't contributed an image to Enery Labs yet. And so since Cumulus has, I decided just to sub that out. And the Ansible folks were kind enough to effectively replace that content and create some Cumulus steps. And it works really well. It's actually really cool. It configures OSPF between them. So it's a multi-vendor network automation lesson. It's pretty dope.
Nice.
So yeah, and it looks great. There's I made a diagram for this lesson, so it's just one of the I have a feeling this is going to be one of our sort of crown jewel lessons, because it's got a lot of nice content in it. There's a good variety of content. It's not just one thing or one vendor. There's just a lot you can play with in here. And yeah, like I said, it's merged, so it's ready to go. It's going to go into the next release because there's nothing else to do.
All right. So have you and Sean talked at all yet about kind of next steps?
No, not yet. I figure what more than likely what we'll do is we'll in the next few weeks, as we go through some of the other things that we need to do for the relaunch, because he's writing a blog and there's a few other things we want to do from that perspective. We'll just keep sending back and forth ideas on the next steps that we can do. My goal is that basically the curriculum plans that I'm putting together will have us on the track for realistically doing one stage every 2 weeks. And I really do think that's doable. We just got to stay on it. So the release immediately after the relaunch may or may not include another stage on this lesson. It kind of just depends on how it goes. But we'll see with Sean what next steps he wants to take, especially after it's gone live and he can send it to some folks.
All right, sounds good.
But there will be space for it. I'm pretty firmly committed to meeting that curriculum release every 2 weeks. That's the more I talk about that, the more I like that. More I like that idea, and we don't have to boil the ocean to make that happen. I think we've gotten into the habit of trying to release a bunch of content at once and make it very impressive. And I'm kind of over that model because it ends up being more of a waterfall model instead of a DevOps model.
Yeah.
And I think I got in my head a little bit saying, one stage is nothing. You need like full lessons. Well, not really. I think it's useful to release, one stage at a time, as long as it's done frequently enough that it doesn't force people to wait too long.
Okay.
And there's plenty of ideas. I mean, if you go into the curriculum, right now, you can see like a tremendously large number of issues opened. Most of them are new lesson ideas. And each one of those, and a lot of those ideas are, again, full lesson ideas. So there's usually multiple stages involved with those things. So yeah, that obviously that's TBD. That's post relaunch activities. We've got plenty to do before we can even get to that point. But it's something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm thinking that perhaps that would be a blog post. Is just even if you aren't yourself equipped to write a lesson, here's a way you could log a lesson idea.
Yeah, for sure.
As a user.
For sure.
Okay, and then I think there were 2 more lessons that we were planning for this launch.
There are, and if you look at the screen, the Kanban board for the curriculum is up there, and you can see it's pretty heavy on the right, which is awesome because that means we're almost done. And the only 2, and so like all the Ansible lesson is done. There were also a bunch of issues with the current curriculum, things being broken and whatnot, just from various things like software upgrades and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I fixed all those. Those are all fixed. So literally the only 2 things that we have left to do are the 2 new lessons, the Git lesson and the revamp of the REST APIs lesson. The Git lesson is almost done. I was originally going to take on 1 more stage, but I'm going to save that for later. Because again, I'm going to try to do many, many more releases for the curriculum over the next, basically, setting the stage to make many more frequent curriculum releases. So that's not a big deal. The stage I had in mind relies on a platform feature that's not quite finished yet. So I'm gonna delay that and release the 3 or 4, I can't remember, I think 4 stages that I've built in this lesson thus far, which is still very substantial, way more than what we currently have, which is like a single stage with 2 commands. So this is effectively a new lesson. And then the same thing will need to be true for the REST APIs lesson. And I have, like I said, this is the reason this curriculum Kanban board is almost done is because this is continuing to receive my sole focus until it's all done. So I'm hoping that probably tomorrow, to be honest, my goal is to by tomorrow, both of these columns will be empty and we'll be ready to cut a new release of the curriculum.
Awesome.
And then turning my attention then to the Ansible release, also in a very similar situation, just need to tie some things up. This task here isn't really even a platform. This is actually just, like I said, I used to put Antidote Ops tasks in here. This is just a task that I need to take on to do the actual release. It's not an actual task for the platform itself. And then there's 2 other things that are fairly minor. I noticed some strange behavior on Chrome with respect to cross-origin requests. and I haven't been able to replicate it, so I may have to drop this. And it's not a huge deal. It's hard to explain, but it's not a blocker. If it comes down to it, we need to make a release. This can wait. And the same thing I think is true with this comment. Our contractor Nils made a comment on one of the PRs that I made, and he said that it wasn't a super major issue, but it might be something that I want to slightly modify. And I was a little bit confused on what he was saying, so I emailed him and asked for clarification. So the reason I'm saying all of this, babbling a little bit, is that we're imminent on a release of the platform as well. Both the curriculum and the platform are both very nearly ready for their releases. And I am absolutely going to try to get everything done well before the end of this week. Hopefully well before the end of this week. But in the worst case scenario, by the end of the week, because I want to be able to allocate basically the entirety of next week for testing.
Cool. All right, and then on the launch front, we're going to have a blog primarily published on Packet Pushers, which we'll reblog on the site. Mm-hmm. We're going to record a briefing and brief with Packet Pushers, which is like just a little 5-minute chat about the cool news. And I believe that you said Sean is looking to do a blog on the new Ansible content.
Yep.
And
yeah, I believe he'll be publishing that on a Red Hat blog. I'm not sure which one, but yeah.
Okay. And then still hoping to get in touch with Pete Lumbus at Cumulus and seeing if he has thoughts or comments with regard to the Cumulus content in that lesson.
Yeah, that'd be great. We still, I think it's still fair that we should have a lesson that more specifically looks into doing automation generally with Cumulus specifically, because that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
But that can, as I mentioned, that can be rolled into a future release.
Yep. All right. Anything else we should cover today?
Well, yeah. Probably mentioned briefly, but I'll bring it up in following meetings. Let me share my screen once more, and I'll tell you what I mean. The thing that I think might need to get brought up more than once, we may have to have other people on the call for this, is the code of conduct is still not merged. We merged the governance doc a long time ago, but we never merged the code of conduct doc.
Oh, no, we had a vote on that at the same time. It should have been merged.
Oh, okay. Well, then I was confused. So I will merge this, and the reason that my attention was drawn to this was because in the docs this is linked, or in the site this is linked to the pull request instead of the actual file. And I think it would be useful, and the reason for that is because it's not merged.
Right.
So I'll merge this, and then I'll update all the references to be the actual file, just like the governance doc is.
Okay. Perfect.
So that's that. That takes care of that. I will remove that. Just a reminder: the CFP for ONES is open until Feb 3. I messaged Sean to ask if he's interested in co-presenting on the Ansible content. I think that'd be a pretty cool idea, but we'll see.
Yep. ONES is the Open Networking and Edge Summit that's run by the Linux Foundation. I want to say it's in April in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't go to last year's, but I went to the one before that, and it was a pretty good show.
Yeah, it's smaller. It's not, in one of these, tens of thousands of people. It's, a couple thousand.
Well, I noticed that in 2018 they were missing the edge, and I'm really glad they added the edge. It's very good.
Yeah. So I think just if you're interested in edge stuff, I think it'll also be a good conference. There's a lot of work being done there right now in the open source space. And that's something that we should perhaps think about actually from a curriculum perspective also, in terms of, sort of the workflow side of things.
Yeah.
but it's definitely something that's drawing a fair amount of attention. So.
And then the last thing I wanted to bring up, and I won't go into detail on this because, again, I think this is, first off, the thing that the design change that I'm proposing is not going to happen for this release, so it's not relevant for the relaunch. This is at least a month or two out. But the way that we present HTTP content, this kind of does link into my Git lesson. I was going to show an endpoint that has GitLab so people can understand how to open pull requests and things like that. The main problem with showing web content today, well, originally it was that the abstraction for doing so was really bad. The way that you defined a piece of content in your lesson that showed a web UI of some kind was really awful. Fortunately, we fixed that in 0.4.0. So the way that you do that is through the new presentations thing, which is nice. It's a nice way of thinking about how to define the way that you want to show your content. The problem, though, is that now the back end implementation for how that actually happens is pretty bad. And the reason for that is because basically web apps kind of suck. Anyway, read this for an explanation of the problems that we've run into. More than likely, we're going to be tackling this in the next version of the platform, probably moving away from a path approach for determining where those endpoints are and moving to a DNS-based approach, because that's kind of the only way that we can. And I'm hoping that the net of this, by the way, the sort of the elevator pitch for why this is important is it will finally give people a reason and an ability to show content from a web perspective without placing, and this is the current hurdle, without placing a huge emphasis on image writers. Which creating images in NRE Labs is still one of the biggest hurdles that we're trying to solve. And I think this will help alleviate some of that pressure, because right now the only way that you're able to show web content is if you configure your image to sort of jump through hurdles to show that content, and it's not scalable. So we want to make it a lot easier for people to do that, and I think this is the path to do that.
Okay.
So I'll keep this in the agenda because I think it's important that we continue to bring that up until it's actually ready to be worked on. But yeah.
Good. All right.
Okay. Moving on. I will say let's call it. I will post the recording here shortly, and for those that are watching, stay tuned for next week, and we'll post what I'm going to do. What I'm going to start doing more is posting the agenda on Monday to like Twitter and stuff. And
yeah, that's a good idea.
And yeah. Get in that habit.
All right. Sounds good. Cool.
Alrighty. Yep. Have a good week.
Okay. Bye.